Time is a cruel thing. It steals, it erodes, and no matter how much you resist it, it always wins. In Hades 2, that truth isn't just narrative dressing. It's the rule that governs everything. I spent 88 hours grinding my way to 100% completion. Every prophecy fulfilled and every bond forged against the Titan of Time himself. And when the final achievement unlocked, it didn't feel like victory. Instead, it felt like inevitability, like I had been dragged along by the current of Kronos' hourglass. Supergiant's first sequel was never going to escape expectations. Could it expand without losing the spark of the original? Could it push the roguelike grind without breaking the story that makes failure meaningful? And most importantly, would it still hold up when pushed to absolute completion? I have the answer now. Hades 2 is immense, radiant, and brutal, but also ponderous, slower, and stretched thin in ways the original never was. Time defines it, elevates it, and haunts it. Before we get stuck in, just a quick note. This is a small channel and every like, comment, and share makes a massive difference. And thank you so much for your support. Alright then, Melanoy, let's get nerdy. The original Hades was a story about family told through fire and brimstone. Its palette was hellish reds and golds, its stakes intimate. Zagreus clashing with his father and uncovering the fractured bonds of the House of Hades. Hades 2 reframes everything. Instead of escaping the underworld, you begin in exile. The house lies in ruins, your father is imprisoned, and the Titan of Time has stretched his dominion across Olympus itself. The tone shifts from defiance to resistance, from adolescent rebellion to something closer to a war story. As Melanoy, daughter of Hades and Persephone, you don't brood in palace halls. You live and train at the crossroads, a liminal camp suspended between worlds. It's a quieter hub but also more communal. Hecate, your mentor and taskmaster, looms larger here. Nemesis skulls around, equal parts rival and ally. Odysseus, ever the tactician, lends his counsel, while the usual chorus of gods cycle through their boons, their vanity, and their grievances. This framing does wonders for the theme. Time as a devourer of homes, relationships, and certainty. Every run feels like an act of defiance against inevitability. Visually, the shift is stark. Where Hades 1 glowed with infernal light, Hades 2 is cloaked in witchcraft purples, misty greens, and spectral whites. The underworld regions feel ancient and mournful. The fields of mourning sprawl with open arenas. Oceanus churns with siren songs, and Tatras itself becomes a suffocating labyrinth. Surface runs add even more variety, taking you to Ephera's storm-wrecked city streets, Thessaly's ship-to-ship battles, and eventually Olympus itself. Each biome carries its own ritual music and visual language, expanding the scope far beyond the infernal caverns of the first game. Thematically, Supergiant leans hard into tragedy. Melanoy is less quippy than Zagreus, more resolute, and her world reflects that seriousness. The Crossroads camp is scattered, patched together, a staging ground rather than a home. Conversations carry more weight. Nemesis, jealousy, Artemis' bond with Mel, Hecate's script mentorship. These aren't just charming asides. They reinforce the idea that it isn't a playful family squabble anymore. This is survival, and everyone you meet has skin in the fight. It's also a world bursting with detail. Gen Z's character portrayals once again feel like they could be mounted in a gallery, alive with tiny flourishes and flickers of animation. Even the most fleeting NPCs have distinct designs and voices. Darren Korb's score matches the mood, pulling back on the triumphant bombast of the first game in favor for a darker texture, though a certain boss band performance deserves a special mention as one of the most gleeful, chaotic set pieces in recent memory. Hades 2 may echo its predecessor structure, but its world is broader, heavier, and more tragic. It tells the story of gods and mortals not just through dialogue, but through atmosphere, visual tone, and the constant reminder that time corrodes all things. The bones of Hades 2 will feel familiar to anyone who spent time with the first game. You push through randomized chambers, string together boons into wild builds, and pray that your kit holds up when the next boss decides to remind you who's in charge. But Supergiant hasn't just reskinned Zagreus' escape. Nearly every system has been rethought, deepened, and expanded on. Sometimes to brilliant effect, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. Melanoi plays differently from her brother. Her sprint replaces Zagreus' dash, which fundamentally alters mobility and demands tighter positioning. She also commands magic, a separate meter that powers Omega versions of her attack, special, and cast. These Omega moves are central to her identity as a witch, slower, heavier, but devastating when timed correctly. Learning to weave them into a frantic pace of combat is one of Hades 2's biggest learning curves. Early on, I found Omega abilities clumsy, interrupting the flow of dodges and quick strikes, but once I built around them, I unlocked entirely new playstyles. The Nocturnal Arms, your arsenal, takes full advantage of this design shift. The Moonstone Axe channels raw power, while the Sister Blades emphasize speed and backstabs. The Argent Skull is a projectile-based nightmare launcher, and the Black Coat transforms into a counter-heavy shield with Seeker missiles. Each weapon also hides multiple aspects that dramatically changed their function. One run I was locking on and peppering enemies from afar with explosive-seeking missiles. The next I was trading blows up close with a tanky counterpunch build. The depth here rivals and in many ways surpasses the variety of the first game. Then there's the surface route. Where Zagreus had one linear ascent, Melanoi splits her campaign into two fronts, the familiar underworld path and the brutal climb towards Olympus. This dual structure doubles the content and keeps repetition at bay, but it also front loads difficulty. Surface bosses hit harder, patterns are nastier, and new mechanics like Thessaly's ship-to-ship arenas demand sharper reactions. For seasoned roguelike fans, this is where the sequel truly flexes its teeth. For others, it can feel punishingly steep, especially mid-game before upgrades smooth the curve. Boons remain the heart of experimentation. Old gods return, Zeus, Poseidon, Aphrodite, but the newcomers steal the spotlight. Hephaestus adds scorching hammer strikes, Hestia layers on burning effects, and Selene's hexes introduce limited use super abilities like sheep transformations or moonlight invulnerabilities. The sheer number of gods' effects and synergies sometimes borders on overwhelming, but it ensures that every run feels distinct. Even two boons from the same deity can alter your rhythm so much that it feels like you're playing a whole new weapon. Progression systems have multiplied. The Mirror of Night is gone, replaced with the Altar of Ashes and the Arcane cards. Tarot-like upgrades that can be unlocked and equipped in limited slots. Incantations at the Cauldron add new features, from resource gathering tools to permanent narrative events. Familiars can be recruited, leveled, and even cosmetically altered. All of this feeds into a web of prophecies and tasks, making the Crossroads feel more alive but also more burdened with currencies and checklists. At its best, it gives long-term players a mountain of goals to chase, and at its worst, it risks drowning the core roguelike purity under layers of grind. Moment to moment though, combat sings. Dodge strikes and Omega abilities flow into one another with kinetic energy. The enemy roster is bigger, more varied, and nastier than ever before, with mini-bosses and elites that force constant adaptation. When a run clicks, when boons synergize, Omega timings land, and you carve through a battlefield with style, Hades 2 delivers some of the most satisfying combat in the genre. If the first Hades was a marathon, Hades 2 is an ultra. To see the credits roll, it took me just under 90 hours for a full clear and achievement sweep. Seeing through Melanoi's tale, well, that was only the halfway point. Completing Hades 2 is not just about defeating Kronos and Typhon, but about fulfilling dozens of prophecies, maxing out relationships, and wringing every last drop of content out of the crossroads and beyond. At the core of this journey are the regional clears, the Witch of achievements that gate your progress through Erebus, Oceanus, and the Fields of Mourning, Tartarus, and their surface route counterparts. These are straightforward in concept: beat the boss, move on. But their requirements diverge enough that mastery of one path doesn't guarantee success in the other. Hectate's precision, Cyclia's rhythm-based chaos, Polyphemus's raw brute force, and Typhon's multi-phase monstrosities each demand different builds and skill sets. For a completionist, these runs never feel like box ticking. They are skill checks layered across dozens of attempts. But the true grind comes from the prophecies themselves. Some are elegant, like Natural Talent, which asks you to beat Hectate with no arcane equipped, or Born to Win, which culminates in a questline with chaos. Others are endurance tests, like Hands of Fates, which require 60 minor prophecies fulfilled, or Arcane of the Ages, demanding clears with every card. And by no means am I saying that there is no joy in chasing these, because they do push you into experimenting with weapon aspects, boon combinations, or NPC bonds you might otherwise ignore. But by the 70th hour, when you're catching your 25th fish for denizens of the depths, or replaying for obscure hex conditions, the shine really does begin to dull. Relationships remain the most rewarding completion task. Bonding with comrades through nectar, ambrosia, and time spent at hot springs or taverna feels like more than stat progression. It's about unlocking story threads that expand Melanoi's relationships with Nemesis, Odysseus, or even Dora the Shade. These achievements, Close to Comrades, Soothing Soak, and Ambrosia for 2, are emotional anchors in a sea of repetition. The writing ensures they never feel like mechanical hurdles. In fact, the most memorable completionist moments I had weren't boss clears but small intimate scenes, fishing with Narcissus or trading barbs with Nemesis after besting her in competition. The familiar system adds a further layer of depth, with 5 companions to recruit and upgrade. Achievements like Animal Whisperer and Beastmaster requires not only finding each familiar but grinding Witch's Delight to max their abilities. It's a clever way to diversify progression, though by the time I was farming skill points for my Raven's last upgrade, it felt more chore than choice. Altering each familiar's form for unfamiliar forms is a charming cosmetic flourish, but again another box on an ever-growing checklist. Challenge achievements also deserve mention. Sheep's Clothing, which has you kill a Sister of the Dead under Twilight Curse, or Dress to Kill, requiring a full underworld clear in the Arachne outfit without losing armor, highlighting the playful cruelty of Supergiant's design. The Oath of the Unseen ramps this up further, tying completion to high fear clears with Behold Knight's Champion and Mercy, and Knight's Executioner. These demand the kind of mastery that separates casual clears from true completion. You'll need builds tuned to razor precision and muscle memory sharp enough to dance around Cronus at his most aggressive. The ultimate endpoint, of course, is Goddess of Nightmares, the platinum equivalent earned for everything else. By the time I unlocked it, my crossroads was overflowing with keepsakes. The cauldron had run dry of incantations, every familiar was maxed, and even Nemesis grudgingly respected me after I'd earned 1000 gold competing against her. It was a triumph, but it was tinged with exhaustion. That's the paradox of Hades 2 as a completionist experience. It is intoxicatingly rich, but deliberately Sisyphean. The design makes failure narratively meaningful, but it also extends progression so far that finishing everything feels like bending time itself. The original Hades had a perfect loop. tight, demanding, but achievable. Hades 2 takes that loop and stretches it across multiple routes, dozens more systems, and a resource economy that borders on excess. Completion is still deeply satisfying, don't get me wrong, but it asks far more of the player's patience and endurance than its predecessor ever did. For you weirdos out there wired like me, that's both the appeal and the warning. 100% completion in Hades 2 is a monumental feat, one that transforms a superb roguelike into a long-term lifestyle game. And it can be worth the journey, but only if you're ready to commit to a grind that feels as endless as time itself. Hades 2 is everything you'd expect from a Supergiant sequel, polished, stylish, and bursting with detail. It's also heavier, dense, and more demanding than the original. Where Zagreus' story was sharp and focused, Melanoi's Odyssey sprawls across 2 campaigns, dozens of progression systems, and a mountain of achievements that can consume hundreds of hours. Moment to moment, it's still a masterclass in roguelike design. The combat is endlessly replayable, the gods are as charming and pretty as ever, and the art and soundtrack set a standard few studios can match. But its ambition comes at a cost. The sheer volume of resources, currencies, and tasks can feel bloated. The difficulty curve spikes hard in the middle, and some narrative threads lose intimacy in the push of scale. From my perspective as a completionist, the game is both exhilarating and exhausting. Every prophecy fulfilled, every bond forged, every weapon aspect mastered. It's all there, but stretched to the point where satisfaction shades into fatigue. That doesn't undo the brilliance on display, but it does mean that finishing everything requires the patience of a titan. Supergiant hasn't reinvented the roguelike genre, but it has expanded its masterpiece into something larger, stranger, and ultimately unforgettable. If you loved Hades, you'll find plenty to admire here. Just be ready to give it more of your time than you might expect. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please, on your way out, remember to like, subscribe, share with your friends, comment down below, and until next time, stay nerdy.